welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to be talking about fathers. So we have three fathers, a part of the Four Mics, Four Men, and so this session is going to be geared towards them. We'll have some experiences, shared from a son's perspective, but we really want to dive into what it means to be a father and what it is to raise children, boy and girl. Mm-hmm. First, we know that with the world the way it is, raising boys is hard in itself. Mm-hmm. But then also it's difficult on the girl side of things because they are unprotected by what the world has to offer as well. So we just want to kick off the conversation. Gabriel, I'll throw it off to you. What is it like being a father?
Wow. I mean, it's one of the best experiences I've ever had, really. To see them being born, that whole miracle of a little me. Yeah. Part of me, part of my wife. That is such a cool experience to be part of. And then, but then you tend to seem to rely a lot about how you were raised.
Yes, correct.
That's one thing I think, going back, yes, my wife sent me to all of the classes the hospital had to offer. I did all of them. But really, the whole thing about things that you weren't prepared for.
Yeah.
Things you weren't prepared for. But definitely, I would say it's one of the best experiences to raise little minds, to pray with them, to see them grow. They grow so quickly. Mm-hmm. What about you, Dad? How was the experience?
Well, the experience of being a father, I considered it and still consider it a very weighty one. Because you have to be almost everything to everyone. You have to take into consideration not just your children's issues that they have, and then how you're supposed to train them, and what is the result of your not training them the way you should. And in addition to that, you have to take into consideration your spouse's concerns about herself and about her children, who are your children. So, one writer, I think it was Ellen G. White, who said that the father and husband is the house band. To keep it all together, make sure. So it's like everything that happens in your household, you are responsible. The buck stops here.
Yeah.
So, and that in itself places a kind of responsibility that is difficult to describe. You have to actually experience it.
Right.
Now, something that you just mentioned there, both of y'all mentioned it, that right now I'm currently going through, I'm having a little struggle with it, is, accepting that was my responsibility. But unfortunately, I believe that there's certain things, because now my kids are growing up, one's 18, one is 14 going on 15. And, characters already developed already and things like that, whatever. And now I'm starting to see certain things that if I wasn't 100% control, I would do a little differently.
Right.
And so I asked myself if I made a mistake on how I approach certain things. When me and my wife had children, I believe my responsibility was to provide, and I focused on that. And sometimes I think I focused on it too much, where I wasn't around enough.
Right.
And so, because I wasn't around enough, I didn't want to come in and disturb the process that was developed. So I kind of took on a little bit hands-off, approach on certain things. But now I'm seeing, that I think you mentioned that you try to raise the children the way you were raised and a little bit the way your wife was raised, and that's my challenge, is that I'm not sure how much of how I was raised has been instilled in my children. Now they may have seen it, and so I trust the Lord, to address that. But I wasn't day in and day out, and that type of thing. And so right now I'm having a little bit of challenge on just trying to say, did I put enough in them to take the good that I think my parents did for me, that they could take along whatever. And I realized, God knows, God did it right when he put man and woman together. And, let's face it, God's ideal is man and woman be together. We know that we have single family parents or whatever. And I realized that, mothers are more the nurturing, but fathers are the structure. Mm-hmm. And we know that even God has structure, right? In heaven, he has structure. Right. There's different degrees of angels. There's angels have different responsibilities. When we read Daniel and Daniel was getting a message, how come the Holy Spirit couldn't just talk to Daniel? Right. No, he sent an angel to go do it, whatever. God has structure with things. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, family dynamics may not bring in the structure that's needed. Right. And therefore, there is not the discipline sometimes that's required and whatever. And now the children grow up and, hardship. One big thing for me was hardship. My dad taught me very early that you're going to have hardship. You just got to power through it. That's it. Power through it. Talk to the Lord. Go about it. Whatever. Right. But I kind of hear with this generation that we're dealing with, and something I hear from my children is when they hit hardship, I don't want to do it no more. Right. And that drives me crazy because I'm like, in life you are going to face hardship, and you can't be made up of the first time you get some difficulty, I give up. Yeah. And so then I'm questioning myself, did I fail in that? Yeah. That type of thing. But, again, I'm having some challenges.
I think that's one of the things, you only get one shot.
Yes,
the pressure is you get one shot, and as the years go by, you're like, I wish I had instilled this, I didn't instill that. And then before you know it, like they're 11 and mine is 7, it's all of a sudden. Yep. But CJ, you and your dad are real close. I mean, what kind of things that you see, the structure that was there in place? I mean, how did your childhood develop with your dad?
Well, we were, I think one of the things that really helped was, and we talk about it in some of the other episodes, is the discipline side of things. I think if he had not sat down to have a prelude to the discipline, then I think I would have viewed him as more of the fear side of things, because every encounter with him at that point would have been just discipline.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But because there was a prelude to it, and then a discussion, and then the discipline, and then another discussion, I didn't appreciate it at the time. Right. But when I look back, it allowed me to see love and discipline, which allowed me not to be afraid to talk to him about things, because I knew that even in coming to him with those things, there could be a non-judgmental conversation, even if there were consequences. I felt free enough to say it to him without feeling like, oh man, I got to cower. I can't say anything to him, or I don't want him to know this, or it took time to build that. But the older I got, is the more I realized that I could have a conversation with him, and not just look at him as a disciplinary figure, or someone who goes plays catch with you, or does these little things. So it developed in that moment. It kind of shifted to even though it wasn't a friend situation, but it's just like a, you know, like a mentor type situation. So if I really take a look at it, what helped to disarm me and was really his approach to discipline. So if I didn't have to fear the discipline in that way, now don't get me wrong, I didn't want to get spankings. That's not what it was.
Right.
But if I didn't fear the person that was disciplining me, then that means that I can go to that person and share things. If I had feared the person that was disciplining me, then all of that stuff would have been kept inside, and I would not have that space to be able to share. So even though the discipline had to happen,
right,
I didn't fear him as the discipliner because of his approach to how he disciplined us.
And I do appreciate hearing that, CJ, because at that time, I wondered how it would turn out. Would you still look at me as one who really loves you? And that has been said, that when you're raising children, you have to show them love. If they believe that you love them, and your approach to any disciplinary actions is in a loving way, then they're not going to look at you. And I appreciate your saying you're not looking at me as really even a disciplinarian per se, but one who can counsel you and to whom you can come to and speak. And I really do appreciate that, because children need to be able to come to their parents with confidence and to speak, whatever is happening, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, just bring it and lay it there before them, and they can provide good counsel and so on. And even if there is some disciplinary action involved, it should be done in a manner that the next time they don't say, well, I don't want to go and talk to him because I'm going to get this and so on and so on and so on. So I do appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that kind of leads, good transition to the other point we wanted to talk about, discipline. How do we go about discipline? Going back to our, a lot of our parenting came from our dads. So I can talk about my dad. My dad, being Haitian background, and his dad was, listen, my job is to provide, make sure you have a house over your head, food on the table, and discipline. And there was no real relationship per se, like the Cosby Show, Theo and Mr. Huxtable, man, Doc Huxtable. I mean, I envied that growing up because I didn't have that. It was, look, I provide for you. And then, I think we talked about the modern child. Like, how much discipline do you actually do now? Yeah. You got to find that right line. Okay, do I discipline this much? Should I do more or less? If your parent was really strict, do you say, well, maybe I don't want to be as strict? It's finding that right balance. I mean, praying about it definitely, and then especially when you have two children, because one thing works for one child, doesn't work for the other child. You're like, well, I did that for you. Why is it not working for the other one? Or the other one reacts differently. So I think for me, finding that right line. I mean, I don't know, Lester. How did you go about? Especially you have a boy and a girl. Yeah. How did the discipline? How did that work with you?
It's funny. It's funny when you say that. I'm still trying to figure out because in my family dynamics, because I was gone a lot, I was the hammer, I guess. That's what, not that I was going through and just whipping people left and right, but when my wife got tired or she felt she needed some support, she'd say, when your dad gets home, blah, 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 that type of thing. And so I had to come in, and unfortunately I didn't follow, what Dr. Henry said, and I came in and just dealt with it. And so I don't know if all the time I showed the love before I dealt with it, and that was hard for me because I was like, I don't want to always be the person that always does the bad stuff. Some things I want us to either figure out before I get there or without me, whatever, so that not every time I interact with the children, in the few times I do, that I come in and I'm the hammer, that type of thing. But with that, you mentioned children are different, and I had children. One gravitates towards me, and the other child gravitates to my wife, and so it's the opposite, when one person disciplines the one that gravitates towards me, I come in and I soften the blow, whatever. and then when I discipline towards the other one, my wife comes in and softens the blow. So it's dynamics I have to kind of deal with because I was close to my dad.
Right.
My dad was able to do a good mix, even though he never threw the ball with me or did anything like that.
Right.
He did things for me, did a few things with me, but he mostly did things for me. So my dad, made sure I had a birthday party. Now, usually it's the mother that does that, but in my dynamics, my dad made sure. And he may not have been necessarily able to do it, but he took me, Chuck E. Cheese was a big deal back then. Right. He would take me there, pay for my friends, whatever, that type of thing. So I at least had something, that type of thing. In my younger years, when I was 3 or 4, my mom kind of did the heel, but when I was of the age to understand what I was doing, whatever. And so, every once in a while, my dad would take me to breakfast on Sunday. Just me and him, get in the car, boom, to a hotel. We used to go to Holiday Inn, whatever, and eat whatever. And so, but he was a nurse, so he worked double shift. Sometimes I wouldn't see him, whatever. But he never threw the ball with me, whatever. He didn't as much come to a lot of my programs. He sent me to the programs, so I was in gymnastics, whatever. So he sent me there, and he wasn't able to be there, but he made sure I was involved in it. And so with that, I didn't feel any bad way of not saying, okay, my father wasn't around per se.
Right.
That type of thing. And that's why I think I leaned towards, I got to provide, and didn't worry about, I need to be there and have prayer with them at night, or I need to go throw the football with them and whatever, because that's the way I was kind of done. And so, I might have changed subjects, but that's both of the children they're going to gravitate. That's all I can tell you. They're going to gravitate, and it's not based upon sex. It's not that the boys are going to gravitate to me and the girls are going to gravitate to my wife. Sometimes it's different, and so I just have a different relationship with both of them.
Right.
So.
That's interesting. You mentioned that about, I think because all of us here, we have multiple children.
Yeah.
And the dynamics for me when I was growing up, when my sister came along, the dynamics between me and my dad changed, because I think a little bit of what you said. Yeah. It's almost naturally I started gravitating towards my mom. Yeah. And my sister, like most girls, gravitate towards their dad. Yes. And then that caused a dynamic change, I think, in the family. Yeah. Because people, they might not talk about it, favoritism, but it's like, hey, you want mom, this one's, so I think that's something that, you try not to, as a parent, say, no, I love my children equally. But the one that's drawn to you, exactly. The one that's maybe a little nicer, it's tough to be like, it's human, right? It's human to be like, how do you deal with that? And then the different personalities of the children as well. Mm-hmm. We talked about this earlier, where what you did to discipline one child, you try to do it on the second child, doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Now you have to change the dynamic. But then the first child is like, well, when I was a child, when I was younger, you did this with me. Why are you not doing this? Yeah. So it's a game. Yes. I think that's a challenge. Yeah. I know CJ is the baby over there. Yeah. So how did that? And then you're the only boy too. So how did that work two girls. You're the only boy. How did that dynamics work?
So I can tell you that they definitely felt like I got away with murder. They definitely did. I think when we talk amongst ourselves, we always say that Jennifer was the experiment.
Yeah.
Lorraine was working on the refinement. And then I was like, well, right. That didn't work, or that worked, that kind of worked. We just gotta pray. I don't know. No.
Right.
No, but I mean, it was, Jennifer used to always talk about how, man, I never got away with that, or I never could do this, or I never could do that. But I think it's because the first one really is an experiment, because you do it. When it got to me, I felt like there was more of a rhythm.
Yeah.
And so I did get a lot of the relaxed type interactions, but I don't know if it was because I'm a boy and I wasn't really doing, or the fear wasn't the same, but I know that my sisters did talk about the fact that there was a difference.
I just want to back up a little and go back to how I was raised. I think I mentioned in a previous session where I lived with my aunt in the country for about 6 years. So at about the age of 7, I went to live with her. But up until the age of 7, because I had many siblings, so there was a lot of interaction going on there, and my father was around. Of course, he was a provider and so on, and my mother there. But that need to have much more of his time and all that was not there, because my siblings were taking that, and older siblings that could. So up until 7, and then when I went to live with my aunt in the country, I spent about 6 years there. So when I came back to my parents' home, and just about I would say another 2.5, 3 years roughly that I spent with them there. Before I left home, I went to do special vocational training and all of that, and then I really never came back to live with them, because one of my brothers and I lived together. He was older and he had his own apartment, and we lived and so on. But those 3 years, he was my father. We always had a good interaction and so on, and he looked out for us and for me, of course, and of course good relations with my mother and all that too. So most of what I learned in that regard was from seeing him, how dedicated he was to his faith. He was Church of God. My parents were Church of God, and they wanted to make sure that you were in church. And you got things ready for church and on every Sunday and so on. So I saw that dedication and the dedication to the family, providing for the family and all that, and so that was for the most part. So I didn't get much. Well, I got a few disciplinary actions from him, but not a whole lot as such, because, as I said, we were engaged with my siblings playing soccer and other sports and so on. So most of the time, I was circumcised, because those older siblings made sure that I kept in order. I couldn't. I didn't have the luxury of getting out of order. Because they and if I were to have gotten out of order, they could discipline me, and then I have to face it again. So all of that. But again, after becoming a Christian and an Adventist and so on, I read a lot about discipline and how to raise children and so on. So all of that fed into my being able to raise children. Of course, my wife, the foundation of all that. So that's another.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I have two boys. You have a boy and a girl. You have two girls and a boy. For me, so I can't really talk about raising a girl, but I can talk about raising two completely different boys. And still in that realm, personality-wise and certain things that you need to do with the first one, that you did with the first one, and you say, okay, I'll just, like I said, implement the second one, but he has different personality.
Yes.
So the same type of discipline doesn't work.
Yes.
Or it's actually works against you if you try to use that.
Yeah.
So for me, it's still a learning curve for me, because I think it is challenging, and especially dealing with the oldest, saying, well, okay, you used to do this with me, but I know that if I use the same method, it doesn't work. So now I almost have to explain to the oldest, listen, I can't do the same thing I did with you because it doesn't work. But I think because they're still children, it's hard for them to understand, like, I don't get it, Dad, I don't get it. So I've had a lot to pray, and I read some different books. I think one thing we talked earlier, there's not a manual. Baby doesn't come out with a manual. All right, this baby's personality, work it, read the manual. That's it. There's no manual per se. So, what about you guys? I mean, raising a boy and a girl personality-wise, how did you guys handle that?
Now, a long time ago, I was listening to this program about raising children, whatever, and from my understanding, a lot of people take that text out of context, champ or child, the way it should go. A lot of times we think that it means train up a child the way you want it to be done, and the child will not change. But the Bible really means train up a child in the what's the word I'm looking for? In the framework of how that child is. So you're supposed to take into consideration how that child is in your training.
Yeah.
And then he will not depart. But if you come in and, like you said, and you say the way you want him to be or her to be, and that child doesn't respond to that, you may turn the child in a different direction. And so it's important for us to understand that we're supposed to kind of figure out what our children respond to, whatever.
Right.
And a case in point is when my daughter was younger, she would get up, sometimes she'd cry, whatever, and she wouldn't go back to sleep. And she would stiffen up her body. When you tell her to do something to go to bed, you get to bed, whatever, she would just stiffen up her body and just start crying, and just, stiff like a board. And my wife would say, "Oh, I'm done." And so I'd have to go in there. Hey, this is like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired, whatever.
Yeah.
And I would have to, we'd be time to put her down. She'd, stiffen up, whatever. And I'd try to hold her, whatever. And she would stiffen up with me. And I would just say, "You need to calm down." I said, "I'll let you go, but I need you to calm down. And I would just have to sit there for a minute, whatever, with her stiff. And then she would let go and she would relax. And then we'd be able to talk to her, whatever, or lay her back down, whatever, that type of thing. But my wife picked up on that very quickly. With LJ, it was, my son, it was different. My wife kind of took the lead on that one because she responded more to him, and so she kind of put him to sleep. But with my daughter, she learned very quickly, okay, I can't put her to sleep. You need to put her to sleep. And so I just learned to just kind of do that. And that goes back to, the bent thing. I think if you have, and if you think about it, what do we say when God deals with us, right? That God gives us all talents. And we ask the question, well, God, why did you give someone 5 and you gave me 2?
Right.
And we're thinking, well, God, I would think you'd be fair. Why don't you give everybody 2?
Right.
Why don't you give everybody 5?
Right.
But God understands what the capabilities of each child is, and where that child will go, and so I think God, in knowing that, He kind of deals with us. Going back to what we said before, he kind of deals with us the where we are, and doesn't give us more than what we can handle, or doesn't say, okay, I want you to be this way, and so therefore you need to follow this regimen. No, he sees what kind of person we are. He knows he wants to get us to an end goal, and so he says, okay, I know I got to deal with this child differently this way. Right. You know, I got to give this kind of one talent, whatever. So when it comes to raising, I think it's just important for parents to kind of notice that, recognize that, and then make the adjustments accordingly.
Yeah, and it's important. What you just mentioned is very important because a parent should study their child or children, and see their temperaments, and be able to know what approach is more effective for each child in dealing with them. Some of them respond more to just talking to them. Some respond more to some form of punishment.
Yeah.
You know, and you can injure a child's mind by the way you impose your kind of authoritarian rule on them. They need to see love. They need to see some kind of reasoning. Some especially in these days, they're asking questions. In my days, when I was growing up, if they say go and do this, you dare not say why. Oh man, why? Your mouth would be on fire or something, right? You know, but my children's age, and then my grandchildren's age, you know, they're asking questions because they want answers. They're learning to reason, and those who are grown like my children, they, you know, you don't just impose something on them. Okay, I'd like you to go and do such and such a thing. You need to give an explanation. It's reasonable for you to give an explanation. You know, now, if something was behind you, ready to snatch you, and you say, you want to say to them without any exerting any fear and so on, and you say, I want you to come forward, take 2 steps forward, and then run. You know, there's no time to give explanation if it is something like that. Otherwise, it's reasonable, and it's reasonable for them to expect that you give them an explanation as to what you are asking them to do. So, now with this the boy or son versus the daughter or daughters, they were different, and even with the 2 daughters, there are differences. Differences. Jennifer has a different way of expressing herself, and
It's a nice way of saying
a very nice way of saying it.
I know it.
you know, and so on, and so you have to study them. I had to study them and know how to speak to them and how to relate to them. But it's also a different kind of relationship than with CJ, my son. You know, there are some things that we will just. We used to do a lot of outdoor activities with all the children, CJ and the 2 girls. But there are some activities that CJ and I would be involved in that they wouldn't be involved in, and so on. But again, it goes back to the fact that you need to study your children and know how to approach them with different issues.
So, you know, to that point, I was the why. And the funny thing about that is, it wasn't that I wanted to question the authority, but I really just wanted to understand why. And I think it it's something that stuck with me because clearly I'm in the field for why. So in being in IT and cybersecurity, we're always searching for the why something is happening or where it's coming from or how to pick something apart to understand where the origin of it is. So it wasn't a surprise to me when I look back and I'm looking at the first time when I started to like IT was when I took apart your computer when I was 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I put it back together without y'all knowing, and it worked. But I took it apart because I looked at it and I was like, I don't understand how this can work. Why is this working? So my inquisitive mind was more so trying to understand, because to me, if I understood it, then I could file it away as, okay, well, I won't do that anymore because I understand it. But if I don't understand it, then my mind starts searching for an explanation as to, well, okay, you're saying it's bad, but how do I associate it with something that's bad so that I can know, okay, I don't do this because of this. But when I understood it, it was easy to say, all right, well, cool. All right, I know this is bad. I may slip up, but I know it's bad, but boom, I can file it away as explained.
Right.
But the sciencey side of me from I was a kid was always the understanding why.
Right.
Well,
So that's, I was about to say that. So you did a good transition from what your parents did, because like you said why repercussions, but you were able to, from what I'm understanding, you were able to transition, understanding that he is a why child. He's going to ask you why. And say, okay, well, he's not being disrespectful in his why, so I'm going to spend the time to explain. Even though back in your generation, there was no why, never had a question. There was no why. You didn't ask why.
Yeah, and what you are touching on is so important, it's cardinal, because there are issues within generations that that create cycles. And sometimes cycles have to be broken in order to transition to a better way of life.
Yes.
As with my generation, when asking why was a dangerous thing. But I was able to transition to my children. Being able to ask why and my giving them an answer. In fact, sometimes they didn't even have to ask why. I would tell them why.
That's true.
And so I just want to ask a question, CJ, with Jennifer and Lorraine. How do you perceive their raising versus your raising and the kind of interaction that we have?
Well, that's a good question. So I think I feel like, and because I'm 7 years younger than Jennifer, so I felt like the piece that I did see, it was more so the working out the kinks, it was the exploratory. How do I guess raise a girl of that age, because I was still young. So when I'm looking at it, that was my perception of it. With Lorraine, I think because we were so close in age, I saw more of the. I think I saw more of the middle child syndrome because it was like Jennifer 6 years, 6.5 years or 6 years apart from Lorraine, and then boom, I came right after, like 18 months later. And so I think there was more of a vying for a place when it came to Lorraine versus for me. For me, I was just on the scene. And so I was the newest baby, so I was there. I was getting the attention. Now, side note, if we go to the pictures, we won't know because everybody else has pictures. I don't. But side note, no. But in that regard, like I did feel, I felt like I got it was like Jennifer, Lorraine got hers, but it's like more of the middle because we were so close. It was shared, so it's like Jennifer got it all for herself.
Yes.
Lorraine got sub until I came, and then it was shared, and so it was just like split.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think that's the thing with multiple children. You know, for a while, especially with me, I had 9.5 years, almost a decade for my sister. So I got all the attention.
Yes.
And then my sister just comes on the scene. And I for some reason, around the age of 13, 14 is when I felt like that drift, where my dad now started drifting towards her. And that caused some issues. But I think for me, as we were concluding, I think one of the things is important is relationship with your children.
Yeah.
Being able to have that relationship, not just simply be the disciplinarian or the provider, but have a relationship. I take two examples in the Bible, Noah and his children. If you know the story of Noah, he was told to build that ark before they were even born. He had to have such a great relationship with his kids that he had to convince them that he wasn't crazy. That there's this flood coming, and that you need to help me build this ark when they've never seen rain. But imagine the fatherhood experience where they trusted him, that he wasn't a crazy old man.
For 100 years.
That, you know what, Dad, I can trust Daddy. I think that's amazing, and that he was even able to convince his children's wives to come on board. I think that's another great one. And another one I really admire is the one of Abraham and Isaac, when God tells him to sacrifice his son. Now, you know, he's a young man, and I just imagine, all right, Trey, I need to sacrifice you. Most young men be like, man, you crazy old man. Push the old man and run. But the Bible says that he trusted his dad so much. He said he just gave himself to be bound. To me, as father, that the relationship that he had to have with his son to that point to know that Daddy's not crazy. That you mentioned, I love you. If I'm saying this, I'm going to do this in love, even this. So I think for me, you know, as I look forward to the next few years, as before you know it, Trey's an adult and Sammy's following up with that, is try on this Father's Day to really try to get closer relationship. Yes, you still need the discipline, you still need to provide, but we have to bring it all together. Right? But that relationship part is key, because you have, some of you mentioned, you have to be their advisor, and so for him to take advice from you when he's an adult,
yes, correct,
we're gonna have that relationship.
Correct. Yes.
You talk about breaking the cycle. Me, breaking the cycle was Cosby Show.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, this is what I want. I want that relationship with Theo and playing basketball.
Yes.
And so I had to take that determination. I'm going to stop the cycle. I understand my dad, that's what he got from his dad. But I want a relationship, and I think that's for me, for the fathers that are looking, find that balance. Find the relationship with your child, and of course, keep God first.
I just want to add a little to the Abraham story, because I wanted to mention that too. God himself said, I know Abraham. He said, I know him, that he will command his household after him. It's not to be a boss, but to be a leader, to set the right example, such that Isaac could allow himself to be bound, to be offered, without resisting the young man, strong and everything. So I know him, that he will command his household after him. And I would hope that he could say that of us. Fathers, I know him, that he will command his household after him. He will lead in love, gentleness, tenderness, understanding, overlooking certain faults. Proverbs 19:11 and Proverbs 29:11. That he would not emphasize the faults. He will minimize the faults try to have correction, but he will minimize the faults and elevate the achievements and the good parts and so on. And when you do that, they will feel comfortable sharing even their faults with you.
Good.
Yep, that's my prayer. I mean, I don't know how it transitioned, but and when it goes back to get the relationship, I would just encourage every father to find out what it is that you and your child has in common that y'all can develop the relationship. Because like I said before, me and my dad, he didn't come to a lot of my programs, but the dynamics of my family was that from Friday sunset to Sunday sunset, pretty much, me and my dad were together, except at night when I wanted to go out with my friends, whatever. But we had a lot of time in the car. And my dad, he worked late shift, whatever, that type of thing, whatever. And it's amazing. Kids don't have to do this now. But I remember many times I'm driving home with my dad and he'd be falling asleep at the wheel. And I would just grab the wheel and turn it.
Wow.
Turn it, and then my dad would realize whatever. And I'm 12, 13 years old, but I'm doing this thing because I know he's tired and I'm doing this thing, whatever. And so while we were driving to church, whatever, my dad would have conversations. So the conversations I have with my son today, my daughter today, are a lot of those conversations I had with my dad.
Nice.
My kids are of age where they're thinking about relationships, whatever. And my dad taught me this young when I was in love with this girl, and I was like, Dad, you just don't understand. I'm in love with this girl. Right? And my dad would tell me, he said, listen, I know you think I don't know what I'm talking about, but this will change, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, but he always told me, he says, but the heart wants what the heart wants. He said, if you stuck on this girl, no matter what I say, you're gonna do what you want to do. And so I know we're supposed to stop, but this is funny. When I was trying to impress this girl, I was bringing her flowers. Right? So I'm 14, 15, bringing her flowers, whatever. And my dad probably said, Lester. He said, a girl like that doesn't know what you're doing when you bring flowers. He said, that's something you do for a woman, that type of thing. Whatever. And I was like, nah, I want to impress her, blah, 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 whatever. Right. He's like, you need to kind of, relax a little bit. Right. I'd be like, man, he don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, so yeah, I would sneak around and try to do the flower thing with all that type of stuff. And so my dad, so now that my kids are older, I understand that when I'm talking to them, it's going through one ear, go out the other. And I share my experience. Listen, I was in your boat. I understand that you're not listening to me. Right? But things will change. So I'm telling you now, listen that I know that you're thinking, whatever. And so, but again, I just want to encourage every, father out there to figure out how to spend quality time with their child. Don't worry about that you don't do everything that the TV shows, but to spend quality time, because they'll remember, the things that you learn in those instances, in that quality time, they'll remember those things, and and God will be able to use those things to fill in any gaps you may be missing.
Right.
So.
Well, we want to thank everyone for joining. I know we're not in the studio today. This was more of an impromptu Father's Day special. Gabriel had it on his heart to really talk about the different experiences raising kids, and also from a son's perspective. So we wanted to have that conversation. We didn't want to wait to go into the studio and do it. We wanted to have that conversation now for Father's Day. So thank you for joining. Hope that you were able to glean some messages from this, and we hope and pray that as those future fathers and those parents who are currently, those who are currently parents, they can leverage experience, and also know that they're not alone, and hear different perspectives on parenting. So thank you so much for joining us. Until next time.
All right. Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Father's Day.